Hi everyone, this is For the Love of Comics and welcome to the next episode in our detailed, some would say too detailed, tour of our entire complete comics bookshelves. Today we're going to be taking a look at shelf 8. If you've missed any or all of the previous 7, you can find them in this playlist linked above. The video today is a bit of a cut and paste job because there is no one shelf 8. Rather, we're going to be looking at 3 different sections scattered throughout this apartment and stitching it together to make this video. We have a bunch of small comics on the top of a tool cabinet just to the side of shelf 7. We have the entire Peanuts box set collection in the bedroom, a portion of my very small manga collection, and a slightly random collection of paperbacks and hardcovers also in the bedroom. So without any further ado, let's jump straight into shelf 8. We'll start with the small comics on top of the tool chest, although there's a lot of other stuff on top as well, so let's get rid of those things first. Let's take a closer look. Over here we have the 6 volumes of Brian Lee O'Malley's excellent Scott Pilgrim series. The 6 volumes are Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, Scott Pilgrim and the Infinite Sadness, Scott Pilgrim Gets It Together, Scott Pilgrim vs. the Universe, and Scott Pilgrim's Finest Hour. These are the original black and white digest format issues. I've also got the first 3 volumes in the hardcover larger color editions that we saw on shelf 3. And as much as I like those new editions and like having it in hardcover and oversized, given the influence of manga on this comic, I'm always going to have a soft spot for these manga digest sized editions. Speaking of manga, the 3 books behind the Scott Pilgrim over here are the first 3 volumes of Naoki Urasawa's 20th Century Boys. A very famous manga that I've heard a lot of really good things about, but unfortunately haven't gotten around to reading yet. I really enjoyed Urasawa's Pluto, though, and one of the viewers of this channel has commented to me that this series is far better than Pluto, so this has jumped up on my to-read list, and I'll be getting to this very, very soon. Moving along, we have a couple of comics from Indian publisher Kikuchi. This is a charming little accordion comic about the founders and how they met, fell in love, and got married. And this is Matchbox Comics, which, true to its name, contains 6 colorful matchboxes, each of which within it contains a little mini accordion comic. Each one contains a different story in different styles, and I think it's just a wonderful piece of work. I believe that there is a volume 2 of Matchbox Comics that is either now out or out soon, and you can bet I'll be getting my hands on that. This is a small hardcover edition of Shannon Wheeler's I Told You So, which is a collection of Wheeler's single panel gag comics. Very funny. Then we have Lily Carey's Tales of Woodsman Pete. This is my first Lily Carey book. I learned about Lily Carey from an extract from this book, the Paul Bunyan story that was included in Best American Stories. After that, I found this book. It's hypnotic and beautiful, and I've been a fan of Lily Carey ever since. Then there's more Richard Sala. People who've been watching these shelf videos will need no introduction to my fandom for Richard Sala. This is The Ghastly Ones, very influenced by Edward Gorey's work, as was Tim Burton. Ivan Brunetti's cartooning, philosophy and practice. From Beguiling Books, Key Moments in the History of Comics, a hilarious little collection of moments that changed comics, like Hergé founds a studio, Milton Caniff discovers the 2 hemispheres of his brain, Will Eisner works out his theory, René Goscinny stops drawing, Charles Schulz goes to school, all the way to Alan Moore joins the Northampton Art Lab, so on and so forth. I picked this up in a used bookstore on a whim, and I've really found it very entertaining. It's like a collection of little in-jokes and references for fans of comics. Then finally over here is Town Boy by Lat, which I really enjoyed, but is a sequel to Kampong Boy, which I have not yet been able to get my hands on. Now we reach back here for the beautiful, charming Owly. I talked about Owly in my Best Comics for Kids video, and these are the 5 volumes of Andy Runton's excellent children's series, almost silent, pantomime, pre-language almost comics that I can't recommend highly enough. So you have The Way Home and Bittersweet Summer, Flying Lessons, Just a Little Blue, A Time to Be Brave, and the collection of Tiny Tales. And along with Owly down there is Lost at Sea by Brian Lee O'Malley. This is the second edition, reprinted after the success of Scott Pilgrim. To be perfectly honest, I didn't enjoy this nearly as much as I did Scott Pilgrim. It is unmistakably O'Malley as far as his style is concerned, but the story was just not as engaging or as funny or as lightning in a bottle the way Scott Pilgrim was. Although, that's 6 volumes, so that's quite a lot of lightning. And these books over here aren't actually comics. These are prose books that have just been grouped over here because of their size, and I should really move them somewhere because I have more tiny comics that could take up room over here.
Which brings us to my next shelf, which contains one of the prize jewels in my collection, the 26 hardcover volumes in 13 slipcases collection by Fantagraphics of the complete and chronological Peanuts by Charles Schulz. This is a simply magnificent set. I almost don't want to talk about it too much because I do want to do a separate video on this collection. Maybe I can group it together with the complete Calvin and Hobbes, which has also been requested. Let me know if you like that idea. Suffice to say for now that this is one of the most beautiful sets that I own. Each slipcase contains 2 hardcover volumes, each volume covering 2 years of the daily Peanuts comic strip by Charles Schulz, magnificently reproduced over here with not just top-notch production but impeccable design by Seth. These 26 volumes in chronological order really put into perspective the amazing achievement that Charles Schulz had with Peanuts, something that is maybe lost these days with all the anthologies and the little collections, focusing on Snoopy, etc., that we are more used to. My next shelf contains a goodly portion of my very small manga collection. We've seen Akira and Nausicaa on previous shelves and just saw 20th Century Boys on the small bookshelf, and this is the rest of my smaller manga. I do have a couple of larger format manga around here somewhere. Here we have Bright Story, Pluto, Lone Wolf and Cub, and 1 volume of Children of the Sea. A book that belongs over here but doesn't quite fit is down here. It's Planetes, which is, it's a science fiction story because it deals with things that we have not yet done, but for the most stays extremely grounded in reality, in science as we know it, and manages to explore some very interesting questions, both philosophical and related to human drama. A really textured and unique series that I'm really happy to have found. I need to find volume 2. This is the first volume. There are 2 books in this series, and that's all. But I haven't been able to get my hands on a reasonably priced copy of Planetes so far. Another one for that list of waiting for the price to fall. Lone Wolf and Cub was, I think, my first manga. It was either this or Akira, both of which I read at the same time. And these are the newer Dark Horses omnibus editions of Lone Wolf and Cub. They were previously published in smaller, digest, regular manga-sized, volumes. I had about 6 or 7 of those, but I had to give them away when I moved. I had them in college and I didn't have a lot of room. And I've been recollecting them in these new editions. I'm happy to say that I'm quite happy with these larger books. I was a little worried that I would miss those original sizes, but I think these books allow the art to breathe a little bit more. I feel that the smaller books somehow did the art a disservice. Some of the panels looked very crowded or muddy to me, and I like having them slightly larger. It's still not regular comic book size, but I really like having them larger in this format. So I may be in the minority opinion over there, but I'm quite a fan of these. So far, I've managed to collect volumes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So with 2 each, that's 10 of the original volumes. I think there were 28. Let me know in the comments below if that's wrong. So I still have a ways to go. Thankfully, that's not the case with Pluto. I have been able to collect all 8 volumes of Urasawa's take on a comic book by Tezuka, Astro Boy, but I haven't read the original comic. I have, however, seen the TV show episode that was based on that comic. I have a very distinct memory of it. I don't remember a lot of Astro Boy. I was very young when I saw that, but I remember that episode. And this book is based on that one episode, on that one story that Tezuka wrote for the Astro Boy manga. And this adaptation of that story, where it takes the ideas of humanity and artificial intelligence and weaves it into a detective story is just one of my favorite works of adaptation ever in comics. I'm usually kind of scared of adaptations in comic book form, but this has truly opened my eyes on how you can take a pretty good story to start with and do something completely different while staying faithful to it. A fantastic book that I greatly enjoyed, and that's why I'm even more excited for 20th Century Boys if Urasawa weaves the same kind of storytelling magic in 20th Century Boys that he does here in Pluto. I picked up Bright's story after seeing some samples of art online, which were absolutely breathtaking, and then reading a couple of rave reviews. So I got the first volume and immediately fell in love with this story of nomads on the Mongolian steppes in the mid 19th century, not just because of the painstaking detail in the art, which realizes everything from clothes to furniture and horses in a way that I just haven't seen before, but also because of the rich and textured look at the characters and their everyday lives and relationships. Very few comics have taken me to a place and time which I have very little idea about, which such effectiveness and which such ease as a Bright story has. It's really a unique accomplishment on several storytelling levels. From one volume to another, we are introduced to a host of characters, leaving behind some of the people that we thought were the central characters to spend time with others, and then circling back again to the people we started the story with. I have till volume 6. I think there are 9, maybe even 10 volumes out, but they stopped becoming available over here at the reasonable prices that they were earlier available at. I have to hunt for the others and, again, keep a watch on those prices. Children of the Sea I found to be a lyrical and quite haunting book in certain ways. It started off a little slow for me, but by the end I was completely sold on the world and the sort of everyday magic that it was weaving. I really need to continue with it. I haven't been able to find the second volume of this, and I think there are a total of 4, so I'll have to get on that. And over here, Lastman isn't a manga, it's a French comic, but it's heavily inspired by Japanese fighting comics and manga. It's created by Balak Sanlaville and Bastien Vivez, and Bastien Vivez's Taste of Chlorine and Polina were really great books, and that's the reason why I checked this book out. I'm not very familiar with manga or with series like Dragon Ball, but what little I know, I can see the influence as well as the subversion in this series of comics. But it's not just that. The story does twist and turn and go in directions that I didn't expect, especially from the first couple of volumes. And it's been an interesting read. The only problem I have with this is the English translations or the English editions, which were being brought out by First Second Comics, seem to have hit a standstill, or I haven't seen some in a while after a number of them came out. Maybe they're being translated from the French, but I know that there are at least 10 or maybe 11 volumes of this book out there, and I only have 6, which is a shame. This is another edition of Leica, which we saw on shelf 3. This is the 10th anniversary edition, which contains some extras that I'm not going to spoil. And this last book isn't a comic, it's an illustrated book, Mr. Bliss by J.R.R. Tolkien, and it's illustrated by Tolkien himself. And it's a nice edition. On one side, it has his original manuscript facsimile in landscape format, and on the other side, you have the modern typography and the portrait reproduction. Very nice. And our final shelf contains another random assortment of paperbacks and hardcovers grouped together mainly due to size. Over here we have Mooncop by Tom Gauld, published by Drawn and Quarterly, which is a wonderfully sad and funny book by Tom Gauld, very similar in tone to Goliath, his previous full-length work. It is simple and sly and yet makes a deep impact where I found myself thinking about this book and its setting for days afterwards, in spite of it being so slim. A Matter of Life by Jeffery Brown is an autobiographical story in which he examines faith and fatherhood, his relationship with his son, as well as with his father. I'm a fan of Jeffery Brown's autobiographical comics, but this is a more mature and sleek and sophisticated book than some of his other autobiographies. Obviously, they were written when he was younger and were about more immature things, perhaps, but he continues to mine gold from material that I think other people have worked on before, but yet find something new and something interesting to say, which is more than I can say for a lot of people who attempt this type of autobiographical comics. Then we have three hardcover books by Gilbert Hernandez: Chance in Hell, The Troublemakers, and Love from the Shadows. These are loosely connected to the Palomar world in Love and Rockets that Gilbert Hernandez has created. There's a character in one of them who's a B-movie actress and has acted in movies of these names. So these are actually comics versions of those grindhouse exploitation movies that the actress has acted in. Another book by Jeffrey Brown, this time a Star Wars book for kids, Jedi Academy: The Phantom Bully. Jeffrey Brown is also the author of a couple of famous Star Wars books, including Vader and Son and Leia, Vader's Little Princess or Daddy's Little Princess. And this is a fun book about a young Padawan recruit in Jedi Academy. And my copy happens to be signed and sketched by Jeffrey Brown. Next up, we have Volume 2 of The Amazing Adventures of the Escapist, the excellent anthology series based on Michael Chabon's character from The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay that I really enjoy. I have all of these square-bound issues. You would have seen them on shelf 1, but I found this collection and it's not a regular trade paperback size. It's smaller in size. I thought it was cute, so I picked it up because it was really cheap. This is I Never Liked You by Chester Brown, an autobiographical comic about his childhood and all the awkwardness and pain that came along with it. I've grown to really appreciate Chester Brown, his way of looking at himself, again, like Jeffrey Brown and like Joe Matt and Seth, who are friends of Chester Brown's, is a very unique way of doing autobiography. This is another comic from indie publishers Kikuchi Mixtape 3, which is an anthology of Indian comics. Like the best anthologies, it covers a wide range of both subject matter and art styles. And if you don't like one, you can always move on to the next one. That's what the great thing about these kind of collections is. This also highlights, for me, who knows very little about the indie comic scene, a number of different creators all in one volume. I'm excited to know that volumes 1 and 2, which were out of print when I purchased this one, are now back in print. I'll be ordering them as soon as I can, along with Matchbox Comics too. And look, it's more Richard Sala. Peculiar and the Green Grove Vampires is a graphic novel starring Peculiar, the star of his Evil Eye comic series and the collection Peculiar that we saw on shelf 1. I don't need to tell you any more about how much of a fan I am of Richard Sala, but Peculiar is perhaps one of the best samples of his work on the way he blends horror and comedy as well as a certain B-movie campiness with this cuteness, with these doll-like heroines who nonetheless can hold their own against some very bad forces. Just endlessly charming. And then we have Super Spy by Matt Kindt. This is a special hardcover edition of one of my favorite comics of all time. This is the book, along with Red Handed and the series Mind Management, that convinced me of what a genius Matt Kindt is as far as storytelling is concerned. This is arranged as dossiers and they're out of order, so the story is non-chronological like some movies or some other comics that you may have read, and concerns World War II spies from Britain, from Germany, from the United States, whose paths crisscross, sometimes directly, sometimes tangentially, and it's full of betrayal and codes and double crosses, the kind of things that you expect from World War II stories, but it also brings a gravitas and a sadness to these lives that are spent in violence, as well as brings a lot of kind of thrills that you would expect from these World War II stories. I really cannot recommend highly enough Super Spy by Matt Kindt. Another copy of Three Shadows that we saw on shelf 3, one of my favorite comics too. And this is the Lost Dossiers Super Spy, which has extra chapters and additional material that can be read in integration with Super Spy. Very, very cool twist on an already twisty book. And another excellent book from Matt Kindt, three-story The Secret History of Giant Man. Possibly his most linear, least twisting work, but also the most emotionally affecting of his books that I've read so far. It may be a cliche, but this is the book that showed me that Matt Kindt could break my heart as well as blow my mind. A great book from Dark Horse Comics. Then we have Unlikely by Jeffery Brown, another autobiography, this time dealing with how he lost his virginity. Along with Clumsy, these are two early autobiographical works that helped me get a sense of Jeffrey Brown. Next is Chester Brown's Paying for It. This is the hardcover edition of his controversial book about prostitution. This book is not for everyone, but I really enjoyed it, particularly because it made me rethink something that I thought I had a pretty firm idea of and a very solid opinion on. Wild Kingdom by Kevin Huizenga is a hardcover collection of stories that he published in his comic series Or Else. I was introduced to Huizenga's work through the Drawn and Quarterly Showcase magazines, and since then I've made it my goal to try and find as many of his books as I can. Sam Alden's It Never Happened Again is a book that contains two short stories within it, and both of them are just wonderful. I have never read anything else by Alden other than this book, but I am on the lookout at all times for more work by him. The simplicity and depth of his artwork and storytelling is very striking and quite unlike anything else I've seen before. It seems unfinished in certain ways, but also extremely polished and assured. A very, very unique voice. Another comic by Lily Carey, this time an adaptation of Hans Christian Andersen's The Fir Tree. This makes perfect sense because Lily Carey reminds me of Hans Christian Andersen in the way that both of them are able to mingle loss and magic in their stories. Next, we have Clumsy by Jeffrey Brown, another one of his autobiographical comics and about growing up and young adulthood. I've enjoyed these comics tremendously, and I'm a big fan of Jeffrey Brown because of these autobiographical comics, and I look forward to how he develops this style that he has made his own. Gloriana is another collection of Kevin Huizenga comics from his series Or Else. I love Kevin Huizenga. I've enjoyed almost every single thing of his that I've read. Whether or not I've understood it all is a different matter. I found this treasury of mini comics in a used bookstore, and it was in very good condition. It was a hardcover comics book from Fantagraphics Books, and that was all I needed to know to pick it up. I was pleasantly surprised to find it full of really interesting material by some creators who I was familiar with, like Matt Feasel, and others who I'd never heard of before, which is exactly the reason to pick up these kind of anthologies and collections, in my opinion. Moving along, over here we have an anthology of Archie comics. I used to read a lot of Archie when I was very young. They were very prevalent here in India, and we used to go through digests and double digests at a very, very brisk rate. But this was more of an impulse buy when I saw it on sale. The good thing about it is that it has 75 stories across 75 years, as the title says, but it also credits all the writers and the artists of these stories, allowing me to finally identify childhood favorites. A brand new arrival over here is Angel Catbird, Book 1, I think, written by Margaret Atwood. I know nothing about this book other than it's written by Margaret Atwood. As you can see, it's still in the shrink wrap, so I'll let you know how it is once I've gotten to it. Another new arrival, although not a new publication, is Dignifying Science, Stories of Women Scientists, written by Jim Ottaviani and drawn by a who's who of women artists. This is another recommendation from one of our regular viewers, and I was excited to find more stuff written by Jim Ottaviani, whose books I've greatly enjoyed, and over here he's joined by Carla Speed McNeil, Linda Medley, and many others. I've only read a couple of the stories in this book so far, and both of them were really good, so I'm looking forward to picking this up again very soon. This is Book Hunter by Jason Shiga, a very funny, very exciting, and very thrilling book about library police who have the power of the CIA and are trying to stop vigilante censors who vandalize library books by redacting offensive language and content within them. It's not only funny, but it's also exciting and a twisting mystery. The cleverness in it is there on every page, which is just par for the course as far as Jason Shiga is concerned. And that's one of the reasons why he's one of my current favorites. He can take some of the most unlikely material and mine it for some great thrills. Zig and Wiki in Something Ate My Homework is the debut comic book of Nadja Spiegelman, Art Spiegelman's daughter, and is a very charming children's book published by Toon Books, Spiegelman and Francoise Mouly's publishing imprint, which is bringing out some excellent books for young children. And finally, Why Comics by Hilary Shute is not a comic book, but about comics, tracing the growth of independent comics and listing, in her opinion, the reasons why comics as a medium is particularly good at telling certain kinds of stories and addressing certain kinds of topics. I find it quite interesting.
As always, I'd love to know if there's anything you saw that you'd like a closer look at and what you thought of this video. If you're new here, consider subscribing and being notified of future uploads. And if you're not new here, thank you as always for watching. This has been For the Love of Comics. Take care of yourselves and I'll see you at the next video.